Lena and Marcus thought a quick stop at the lonely rest area would give them a break from the long night drive. But as soon as they stepped out of the car, the fog swallowed them whole, and the shadows began to watch. What started as exhaustion soon turned into a nightmare that would follow them far beyond the highway, into a place where no one leaves and every reflection hides something waiting. I had been driving for hours, the endless highway stretching out under the dull glow of my headlights, the pavement disappearing into the darkness like a river of black silk. My eyes were heavy, burning from exhaustion, and the monotonous hum of the engine had become a low, numbing drone that echoed in my skull. Every mile felt the same, a blurred repetition of road signs, faded lane markings, and distant glimmers of reflective markers that seemed to wink at me like eyes. When I saw the sign for a rest area up ahead, relief washed over me like cold water. I couldn't push any further. My body begged for a break, and my mind, fraying from fatigue, craved something familiar, a touch of light in the unbroken night. Pulling into the rest area, I noticed the lot was almost deserted, except for a handful of parked cars that looked abandoned. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, their stuttering glow casting long, quivering shadows across the cracked concrete. The air felt unnaturally cold, as if the night itself had seeped into the space between the lot and the building. Stepping out of my car, I shivered despite my jacket, the chill gnawing at my skin. A strange, almost imperceptible smell hung in the air, a metallic tang that made my stomach twist. It wasn't quite blood, not exactly decay, but something equally wrong. I walked toward the small building at the center of the lot. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open, the sound echoing in the empty space like a warning. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit, the fluorescent bulbs flickering, making everything appear warped and unreal. The walls, painted a sterile off-white, were marred by dark smudges and streaks I couldn't identify. The vending machines stood in neat rows, their glass faces reflecting my tired eyes back at me in a distorted, almost mocking way. For a moment I considered turning back, but exhaustion and habit propelled me forward. I needed water, a snack, anything to keep me awake. As I reached for a bottle, I froze. A faint sound echoed behind me, a dragging, shuffling step. My heart rate spiked. I spun around, but the lobby was empty. My pulse thundered in my ears as I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the quiet, my imagination playing on my fear. Yet the shadows in the corners seemed to quiver, stretching and contracting as if alive. The dragging sound grew louder, closer, though every time I turned, nothing was there. My body tensed, my senses screaming at me to leave, but some dark curiosity held me rooted in place. A hallway at the back of the lobby caught my eye, and a shiver ran down my spine. It led to a bathroom, its door slightly ajar. From within came a faint, almost imperceptible whispering, too soft to understand, but undeniably human. My hand hovered over the handle, trembling. The whisper seemed to beckon me forward, yet my mind screamed in protest. Suddenly, a cold gust of air slammed the door open on its own. I froze. The tiles inside were slick, reflecting the dim light like a mirror, and then I saw it, my reflection, but not exactly mine. Behind me, in the glass, stood a figure, its shape blurred, its presence unmistakable. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty, and yet I could feel it there, watching, smiling, waiting. I ran back to my car, my heart hammering in my chest, lungs burning with each ragged breath. The lot seemed larger now, darker, with corners that hadn't existed before, shadows pooling in impossible shapes. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, each one stretched and delayed, as if the pavement itself had grown thick and heavy. The few parked cars that had looked abandoned before now appeared twisted, their windows fogged over with something darker than condensation, something alive. My hands shook as I fumbled for the keys, but the ignition refused to turn. the dashboard lights flickering weakly like the last heartbeat of a dying animal. Desperation clawed at me. I had no idea where I was anymore. The rest area felt wrong, as though the familiar structure of reality had bent itself into something unfamiliar, something predatory. I noticed a narrow path leading off the lot, barely illuminated by a row of broken streetlights. The fog between them swirled unnaturally, thick and sticky, pulling my gaze forward. Against every instinct screaming at me to stay, I found myself walking toward it, drawn by some invisible force I couldn't name. The crunch of dirt and gravel beneath my shoes sounded impossibly loud in the silence, every step echoing as if the world itself were holding its breath. Then I saw them. Footprints, enormous, pressed deep into the earth, moving in jagged circles. They weren't human. The size, the depth, they suggested something monstrous had passed through here recently. A cold knot of fear twisted my stomach, but I couldn't stop myself from following them, each step heavier than the last. The forest around me pressed closer, branches reaching out like skeletal hands, scraping my arms and face. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, always just out of focus, as if the darkness itself were alive. A rustling came from the trees, soft at first, almost like the sigh of the wind, but wrong, deliberate. My pulse spiked. I froze, straining to see, but the fog and shadows conspired against me. Then I caught movement. A pale figure crouched just beyond the edge of the path. Its head tilted unnaturally, body contorted in a way that should have been impossible, and its eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, fixed on me. It wasn't human, but worse, it mimicked me. Its face, though distorted, carried my features, twisted into a grotesque mockery of familiarity. I turned to run, branches clawing at my jacket, my breath ragged in the thick, cold air. Panic surged through me like electricity. But when I dared to glance back, it hadn't moved closer, yet I could feel its gaze like a weight pressing into my spine. It tilted its head again, smiling, a slow, cruel grin that promised no escape. My mind screamed at me to turn around, to look for safety, but the path had vanished. The forest had swallowed the way back, leaving me alone in the fog with this impossible watching thing. Every instinct told me to keep moving, to flee blindly. But the path seemed endless, the shadows multiplying around me, whispering in voices that were mine, and yet not mine. The figure remained just at the edge of visibility, always crouched, always waiting, its grin widening as if savoring my fear. And then I realized the worst part. I was not just being watched. I was being studied, catalogued, hunted. Something ancient and patient had chosen me, and the forest, the rest area, the shadows, they were only the beginning of its trap. I stumbled through the fog, my legs aching, my lungs burning with each ragged breath. Just when I thought I couldn't go any further, I saw a small building appear ahead, half hidden among twisted trees. It was more like a shed than a restroom, its walls warped, peeling, the windows dark and grimy. Relief surged through me and I rushed toward it, ignoring the nagging feeling in my chest that I was walking straight into something far worse. The air grew colder as I approached, and the faint whispering returned, softer this time, more insistent, brushing against my ears like dry leaves. I pressed my back to the wall, trying to decide whether to hide or step inside. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but curiosity and terror combined into a force I couldn't resist. Peeking through a cracked window, I thought I saw mannequins standing inside, lined up like eerie sentinels. At first, their stillness was comforting, but then I noticed something impossible. Their eyes shifted as I watched, tracking me, some faces disturbingly familiar. My stomach lurched, as I realized one of them looked exactly like my high school friend, the one who had disappeared years ago. Its expression was frozen in fear, eyes wide and pleading. I pushed the door open cautiously, and the smell hit me first. A thick, metallic stench, sharp and bitter, curling into my nostrils and making me gag. The air inside felt heavy, suffocating, as though the building itself was breathing. The mannequins weren't mannequins at all. As I moved closer, one fell toward me with a hollow, wet thud, revealing a cavity inside where a human body should have been. My pulse skyrocketed as the horrifying realization hit me. These were empty shells, preserved like some grotesque collection. The whispering grew louder, overlapping, forming words I couldn't understand but somehow felt compelled to obey. I tried to back away, but the shadows along the walls began to twist, stretching like living creatures. I could feel them crawling along the floor toward me, and a cold hand brushed against my arm. I spun, but the room was empty. Panic took hold. Shapes started emerging from the corners, their bodies warped, limbs bending in impossible angles, faces twisted in permanent, silent screams. The floor beneath me began to shift, rippling like water, tugging at my feet, trying to pull me down. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall, and the whispering became a chorus of moans and hisses, filling my head, drowning my thoughts. I felt eyes on me from every direction, though the room appeared empty. The shadows thickened, forming figures, each one staring at me, their mouths opening impossibly wide. One leaned close, and I could see inside, not teeth, not a throat, but a void of pure black, endless and consuming. My legs gave out, and I fell to the floor, scraping my knees, my hands clawing at the tiles. I could hear a slow, deliberate breathing circling me. Something massive moving just out of sight, its presence undeniable. My mind screamed to flee, yet I knew there was no escape. The walls seemed to pulse, and the shadows whispered promises I didn't understand. Then, with a sickening inevitability, I realized the truth. The building wasn't just a trap, it was alive. It had been waiting for me, collecting, studying, and now it was ready to feed. And in that moment, the empty shells surrounding me seemed to turn their faces toward me in unison. A silent welcome to a fate I could already feel creeping closer. I forced myself to leave the shed, stumbling into the foggy, unfamiliar road beyond. My legs shook, my chest heaving, and a deep, cold dread settled into my bones. The rest area, the building, the horrifying figures, they were gone, replaced by a desolate stretch of highway bathed in mist. I thought I was safe, that maybe it had been a dream brought on by exhaustion, but the instant relief I felt was fleeting. The fog hung heavy, clinging to my skin like a living thing, muffling sound and twisting the familiar into something alien. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, empty and silent, yet I could feel I was not alone. Every step I took seemed to be mirrored in the fog, though I could see no one. Shadows moved at the edges of my vision, bending, twisting unnaturally. Each time I turned, they vanished, leaving me questioning my senses, questioning my mind. But then the sounds began. Soft at first, almost like the wind. Then heavier, deliberate, the rustle of something gliding over the asphalt rather than walking. I dared not look, yet my instincts screamed that they were coming closer, studying me, playing a cruel game I could not win. Ahead, a building appeared, glowing faintly in the mist. A gas station. The relief was immediate, almost intoxicating. I ran toward it, desperate for light, for human presence, for proof that I wasn't losing my mind. But as I stepped inside, the warmth and normalcy I expected were absent. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering violently. The attendant stood frozen, bodies stiff, heads tilted at impossible angles, eyes blank and unseeing. I felt a nausea twist in my gut as I realized something was wrong. Everything in this place was wrong. The restroom door at the back of the station drew my gaze immediately, identical to the first one at the original rest area. I knew I should stay away. That reason demanded I run, but something unearthly compelled me forward. The air grew thick, metallic, and as I stepped closer, I noticed the floor covered in hand-carved symbols, etched deeply into the tiles, the grooves filled with something dark, something sticky. Whispers rose around me, overlapping in dozens of voices, none of them human, none of them kind. Shadows along the walls thickened, stretching like crawling insects, reaching for me. I backed into the corner, heart pounding, sweat running cold down my spine. Reflections appeared in the metal panels, my face, twisted, grinning, eyes hollow, whispering things I couldn't understand but felt in my very bones. Shapes began to coalesce from the corners of the room, tall, impossible figures, with elongated limbs and mouths that opened too wide. They surrounded me silently at first, then began to move, bending the air around them, warping the space like liquid. The building pulsed as though alive, breathing with a slow, deliberate hunger. I realized then, in the deep, paralyzing core of my fear, that the rest area wasn't just a place. It was a living trap, patient, intelligent, feeding on the terror of anyone who wandered in. And I had wandered too far. The whispers, the shadows, the empty shells, they were all parts of it, parts of a system designed to study, torment, and consume. I was caught in the center, a puppet in a place that had no exit, a world where every turn and every step led deeper into something I could not understand, something that would not let me leave. I awoke with a jolt, my body cramped and soaked with sweat. The engine of my car was running, the dashboard lights flickering softly, and outside, the fog curled across the highway in slow, ghostly tendrils. Relief washed over me in a hollow wave. It had been a nightmare. It had to be. The rest area, the shadows, the grotesque figures. They had all been a fevered dream brought on by exhaustion and hours of lonely driving. I took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel, promising myself I would never stop again. But the relief didn't last. When I glanced into the rearview mirror, I froze. A figure was sitting in the back seat. Pale, slouched, completely still, its face featureless except for two dark, gaping eyes that seemed to drink the light from the car. My hands clenched the wheel until my knuckles ached. I spun around, heart hammering, but the seat was empty. I exhaled shakily, trying to convince myself it was a trick of my tired mind, the fog outside reflecting in the glass. I tried to move, to put distance between myself and whatever was following me. But the highway seemed endless, stretching out before me with no sign of civilization. Then, in the distance, a flickering light appeared, the familiar glow of a rest area. Panic surged through me, cold and sharp. I had to be imagining it. There should be nothing here, no rest area, no lights, nothing but fog and asphalt. And yet, the sign glowed faintly, beckoning, as if it had been waiting all along. I couldn't stop myself. My body betrayed me, pulling toward the lot even as my mind screamed for escape. The closer I got, the more I noticed the shadows beneath the flickering lights. They weren't stationary. They moved independently, crawling across the pavement, stretching impossibly long, bending in ways that defied reality. As I approached the entrance, I caught movement from the corners of my vision. Faces, dozens of them, staring from the darkness. Familiar faces, friends, strangers, people I had never met, all twisted, hollow, grinning silently. My chest tightened, and nausea burned in my throat. I tried the door, and it opened with a groan, revealing an interior that was both identical and entirely alien. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. The smell hit me instantly. The same metallic, bitter stench that had haunted my nightmares, thick in the air, clinging to my skin. The lobby was empty, or so it appeared, but I could hear whispers again, soft at first, then growing louder, overlapping, rising into a cacophony that filled my skull. And then I saw them. Not mannequins, not shadows, but people. Or what had once been people, standing still in perfect formation, their faces pale and hollow, eyes dark voids. I realized with horror that they were staring directly at me, and as I moved closer, I understood. Each face was someone I had ever known, someone who had passed through this place before me, and in the far corner, a figure crouched, tilting its head with that impossible predatory smile. Its face mirrored mine. I tried to run, but the floor shifted beneath me, the building pulsing like a heartbeat. My reflection appeared in the glass of a vending machine, grinning, eyes black as the void, and then I understood with bone-deep clarity that I would never leave. I was already part of it. The rest area wasn't just a place. It was a living, patient entity. And now it had claimed me. The highway stretched endlessly outside, fog curling, silent, waiting for the next traveler foolish enough to stop.